Hello, welcome to Huntsman's Ranch. We are your hosts, Ernest.
And Angie.
We are here to share our adventures on the ranch and beyond. Come join us as we share our experiences along the way.
So today's podcast is just us, our introduction, kind of our move to Texas, and I'm going to let Ernest start.
Okay, so a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Las Vegas in the 70s. So I got to see Las Vegas start from the Rat Pack and Elvis era and transform into what it is today. At a young age, I liked war movies. I had, people that I looked up to that served in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I was going to go into the military at a young age. But while I was growing up in Las Vegas, I didn't really have structure and organization in the life that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
People today would call it dysfunctional. My parents divorced when I was 10. And so getting past that, I joined the Army when I was a senior in high school on a delayed enlistment. And basically, once I graduated high school, I was just in a holding pattern until I was going to go to basic training. So my contract that I had signed up for was Ranger Station of Choice, RGV4, as the Army called it. And basically, that guaranteed me infantry school, airborne school. Back then it was called Ranger Indoctrination Program. And then subsequent to that, I would have been assigned to a Ranger battalion somewhere in the U.S. So the jobs, it was funny because I was very small. I wore glasses. I was very lightweight, short. So the jobs that I wanted in the Army weren't available to me when I went to the recruiter. So my first option, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, and I didn't have 20/20 vision. So the recruiter was like, no, that's not an option. So then I was like, well, what about MP? So by that point, when I was going through the enlistment process, somebody that I looked up to very highly was a former Marine sniper and was on the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's SWAT team. So I knew that my trajectory in life kind of was going to follow his path. And so I was not sure about military as a career, but it was more like a stepping stone for me.
Right.
And so MP was the logical second choice for me. And they said that I was too short. Back then they had a height requirement for the MPs. So I think my senior year I was probably about 5 foot, I don't know, between 5'4" and 5'6". I wasn't very tall. And I weighed a whopping 110 pounds. So the recruiter kind of laughed and he said I couldn't be an MP. So I was like, well, show me what you have. And I didn't know the term high speed back then, but I was like, show me something cool. And so he breaks out this giant record looking disc that it was a laser disc back then, I guess, or something. It was something weird. And he pulls up Special Forces. And they're doing all this cool high speed stuff I've seen in the movies like John Wayne, Green Beret. And I was like, oh, I want to be that. And he's like, well, you can't. You got to be in the Army before you can go. You just can't jump right into the Green Berets.
Right.
Nowadays, they actually have a program that allows people to come in off the street and jump right through training to be a Green Beret, which I think is asinine. But back then, it wasn't an option.
Well, I'm sure they know. Not everyone makes it, though.
Right, not
I think
everybody.
they're going to be a Green Beret, but...
Right, not everybody makes it, but I think that leapfrogging, and a good friend of mine who went through all that stuff, that will be on a podcast later, I think he shares the same thought process. Like, to me, they don't get the foundation in infantry tactics and stuff like that. So I think it's a bad idea. So when the recruiter said that I couldn't do that right out the gate, I said, well, what do you have? And he showed me a video of Army Rangers. And I was sold. I was like, that's what I got to do. In the back of my mind, I never even thought that well, wait a second, dummy. You're afraid of heights. Like, you get jittery and shaky whenever you look over a ledge with any kind of, like, elevation. So I was like, in my mind, I'm like, well, the only way to get over your fear of heights is to just do it. Do it scared. But just do it. And so I joined, I enlisted young, like I said, and I went off. It was right before Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. So I think it was January of 1990 when I went in. Panama had just gone through, and I came in. So, anyways, I only did a short stint in the Army. I did one enlistment with an extension, and I finished up in the 82nd at Fort Bragg. And I had married my high school sweetheart, and we had a baby on the way. So during that initial enlistment, I had actually gone to Special Forces selection in April of '92, and had a heat stroke, was medically dropped, but they told me that I wasn't. So here's a term I'm gonna have to define. So there's a term when you go through selection called VW, voluntary withdrawal. Well, VW is also known as Farfanugan, the vehicle, right? So Farfanugan was a term for the selection if you quit. And because I didn't quit voluntarily, and I was a medical drop, they told me that I could come back after 6 months. So unfortunately, it took more than 6 months for my body to recover from the heat stroke. And I was just a runt still. I think when I went to selection, I weighed 124 pounds. I was the smallest kid in the class. I felt like I was their mascot because they were watching me closely. But I traveled from Germany to Fort Bragg, and I got sick on the plane. I developed a flu. And so when I get to the school, I'm literally vomiting, diarrhea. I can't stay hydrated. So I medically dropped. Fast forward, I end up at Fort Bragg, and I'm still not really in shape physically to go back. So with the baby on the way and some stuff that happened at Bragg, I ended up leaving the service, and I returned to Las Vegas. And the marriage was already on the rocks back then. So, but I was trying to do the honorable thing. I had a daughter on the way. So, worked in the casino business for 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, I was topped out at $12 an hour, trying to raise a family. And my GI Bill was approaching its deadline. So I was not in a place in life where I felt like I wanted to be or I should be. So I started using my GI Bill. When my kids, at that point I had 2 daughters, and so when my kids started school, I went back to school. So I would drop them off at school in the morning, and I would go to UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I would take classes during the day, and I would be out of class in time to pick them up from school, and I'd get them settled in, help them with their homework, and then I would go to work for the night. So I did that. Full-time student, full-time dad, full-time work. And towards the end of my junior year, I had started the testing process for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and ended up getting hired on as a correction officer. And so I was actually an employee of Metro when I graduated UNLV. So I finished my degree, and by that time I was on the department, career in law enforcement, and making good money. Metro pays their employees very well to deal with the shit that they have to deal with.
Perfect.
So while I was working at the police department, I went through field training, and my current wife, who is sitting across from me here, was actually one of my FTOs. And I have to say, I told everybody till the day I retired that she was the best FTO that I had. At one point, she was one of my sergeants, and I tell everybody she's the best leader that I've ever had. So when life happens and we ended up both being single at the same time, I knew that, I wanted to be with you. So we started that dating process, and here we are today, married and in Texas. So just for the listeners out there, you know, we're on round two of relationships, and we have adult children, and we had a very frank discussion when we first started dating, basically laying out obligations and expectations of, what we were looking for. And one of the things that Angie told me was that when she retires, she wanted to come home to Texas. So I knew it was on the table that I would have to make a decision that if I wanted to be with her, that I was going to have to commit and leave my hometown of Las Vegas and move to Texas. So as you can see, here we are in Texas. So I definitely agreed to that arrangement. Um, I do love Las Vegas. I miss many things about Las Vegas. Um, but it's changed since I was a child, and it's not the same that it was. When I was growing up as a kid, we could walk to the 7-Eleven with, no real issues. The safety wasn't a concern, and we could roam. The valley wasn't built up from mountain to mountain. There was,
Literally.
yeah, there was a lot of desert lots, dirt lots that we could play in, ride dirt bikes, hunt, fish, trap, do all of the outdoor activities that we wanted. And I would consider Nevada back then to be a very conservative state. Everybody owned firearms. They have open carry laws in Nevada. And over the years, migration out of California into the Las Vegas Valley has, we saw the housing market crash in 2009. For the most part, jobs in Las Vegas for your average, you know, your average citizen is not going to be a very good living wage. Now, there's jobs out there that make a lot of money in Vegas, but the housing market rose too fast that the employment monetary levels couldn't sustain that. So I retired from the police department after 16 years, and then it was a year later that you retired. And so we decided that we were going to pack up and move to Texas. So we didn't really hesitate on that. Once we knew we were going, everything was put in place. And you're very good at your organizational skills and your planning. So you found us a rental.
Right.
And in Texas. And then we had to pack up a 4,000 square foot house. And we were moving, at that time, we were moving from a 4,000 square foot house into a 1,600 square foot rental. So it was like trying to put a square peg into a round hole. I think at this point, tell me about yourself and like catch us up to where we're at here in Texas as far as the move to Texas, from your perspective and where you came from. So that way the listeners can, see both sides.
So I was raised in Texas, North Texas, actually, in a small town that my husband said is not a small town anymore, which it isn't. It's grown over the years, right?
Yeah.
It's huge now.
I think so.
Kind of extension of Dallas, more or less now. And I knew that if I wanted to go to college, I had to go in the military because we just didn't have money when I was growing up. So right out of high school, I did the same thing, deferred enlistment, joined the United States Air Force. Actually became an SP, what you would call an NP, we call SP. And I spent 6 years in the military. I spent 3 years overseas in England and 3 years at Nellis Air Force Base. And during that time, I didn't go, I went to a little bit of college here and there, but didn't do too much. And now I think back that I wanted to be an accountant, and having studied some accounting as an adult, I'm like, yeah, no, not my choice. So I did, spent my 6 years. I moved back to Texas, and I went to college, and actually I have an associate's degree, but in British literature because I wanted to teach. And after that, I moved back to Las Vegas. So I was married at the time to someone high patrolman. There was no living anywhere but Nevada. So back to Nevada I went, and I was a stay-at-home mom until 2001 when I did the same thing. I went into law enforcement in Las Vegas Metro. We call it Metro, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Metro for short, in corrections. And I did spend 19 years there. I retired as a supervisor. I loved, I would say, 95% of my days there. It was just a good job, and although we dealt with crazy every day, it was still, it was a blessing, you know. It afforded me to meet you. Like you said, when we were both single, we started dating. And yeah, that was my thing. When I retired, I wanted to move back to Texas. I missed what I call home, and that was a huge commitment on your part. I'm glad that we're here in Texas because I love it every moment. So yes, I retired, and literally after I retired, we, oh my goodness, did a lot of packing, a lot of packing.
Yeah,
And
because if I'm not mistaken, you retired in December.
January.
It was January, and didn't we
Officially.
pack up the same month?
Mm.
We didn't stay a year.
No, I basically took terminal leave, just took as much vacation as I could at the end, and stayed home and just packed. Like
Right,
November,
as you were
December.
transitioning out of Metro,
Mhm.
I remember because we'd actually talked to the kids. This fly is gonna die. So we had originally talked to the kids, and the intent was I was gonna stay on Metro
2 more years.
2 more
after.
years after you, and then just things didn't work out, and it was time for me to go. And so the kids were kind of blindsided because they were expecting to live with us for an additional 2 years. So we made those arrangements with them so that we could come to Texas early. Yeah. So let's talk about the packing and the move because
Yeah.
it was quite an ordeal.
Yeah. Packing wasn't so bad. And I'm thankful because all of our friends that came over to help us load the truck, that was insane. That would have
Right.
taken us so much time, but it took us what, like 2 hours?
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah.
I mean, we gave furniture to all the kids.
All the kids got our furniture pretty
Yeah.
much. So we were coming to Texas with minimal furniture.
Minimal furniture. Yeah. We didn't have a couch. We had a table.
Yeah, we didn't have sofas.
We had a bed
Chairs.
and a table.
Right.
Dining table.
Yeah.
Kitchens.
Kitchen.
Yeah, we didn't have
We didn't have much. So I think that the Metro employees, they always say Metro is a family.
100.
And whenever it's crunch time, whenever you need something, they're there.
Yeah.
You know, so in that respect, the line troops that are on the line, you know, some of the sergeants, it's definitely a very tight-knit family
Yeah.
because they were there to help. And you spend a lot of time together.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I still think so, right? We still have friends.
yeah, yeah. So I think, so for me, the move, it was a little more stressful for me just because I was leaving my kids in Vegas.
Yeah, we both left our kids in Vegas.
Yeah. But you have roots and family here, and basically, so I was walking away from family and friends and everything I had known.
Yeah.
For my whole life, really. But I felt like it was a good move. And so once the truck was loaded, and we were getting ready to get on the road, the weather in Vegas, but Vegas is so dry.
Yeah.
But the when we left, it was
Yeah.
raining.
Yeah.
It was kind of foggy,
Right.
and we hit a weather front in Arizona and New Mexico that it was literally blizzard whiteout conditions. There was ice on the road.
Yeah.
There was snow on the ground, and the windshield wiper fluid in the vehicles had frozen.
Yeah.
So we're literally every mile or two pouring water bottles on the windshield to scrape it clean. And we ended up getting diverted off of Interstate 40.
Yeah, it didn't even take us the 40 until, gosh, it took us
Up into northern Arizona,
up
right?
there. So we went, I don't know, up to 95 and then across into Page, Arizona, all these places that went through like how many reservations we go through. I mean, just was in the mountains, high mountain deserts, just
Yeah.
snow everywhere.
Yeah, it was really insane. Just trying to leave Vegas, it was like the Mother Nature was not happy.
I think we came down in Gallup, New Mexico and hit the 40. So we drove all the way across really far north of Arizona.
Rural, backwoods highways. Well, I can't even say woods because it was desert at it.
Horrible drive.
I had never been in that area of Arizona, and so I was just hoping that the vehicle wouldn't break down or end up in a ditch.
It
So
was scary.
I remember, so I rented a Penske truck because I didn't want to look like, every Joe Schmo from California leaving in a U-Haul. So I kind of, in my mind, I had this thought process that I was going to rent a Penske truck and I was gonna not stand out as some liberal fleeing California into Texas. So I was not aware that Penske trucks are used by commercial companies. So every time I crossed the state line, I was getting pulled over. And I get pulled over a lot in my everyday life.
Because
I would say that I don't speed, but I drive above the posted speed limit within like 5 to 10 miles per hour.
okay.
So I try to stay within that. Sometimes I go higher, and sometimes I pass law enforcement.
Sometimes.
It's happened. So when I crossed every state line headed to Texas, I was getting pulled over. And they thought I was a commercial vehicle and I was dodging their commercial checkpoint.
Now you have to imagine though, it was like in New Mexico, it was a blizzard.
Yeah.
And you got pulled over. I'm like, really?
Right. Yeah, it was insane. So when I finally hit Texas, it was almost like it was almost like an old cowboy fleeing to Mexico to avoid the law. Like I once I crossed Texas state line, I felt like, okay, I'm home, I'm safe. Like
But you get pulled over in Texas.
I did not get pulled over in Texas.
What's the sign?
And-
there?
But when you get into Texas, the terrain changes drastically. It goes from the mountains of New Mexico around Albuquerque to some hills in West Texas, and then all of a sudden, it's like the earth just got flattened. It's like a bed sheet that has no wrinkles in it. And so when I came through, because I was in the rental truck and I was far behind you,
Right.
it was dark, it was foggy,
Yeah.
and there were these like giant red lights flickering on both sides of the highway, and it was like War of the Worlds when the aliens attacked.
Right.
Because they're all flashing in sync, like in unison.
Yeah.
And I'm like, had I not been through there in the day at one point,
Right.
I would have literally had my pistol in my lap.
Right.
But they were the windmills.
Right.
And at night, it's all you see is this ominous red flashing light on thousands of windmills out in the plains. And
I'll say this. So I usually fly to Texas. So the first time I actually driven back in a lot of years, I didn't even know those windows were there. That's long I had not driven. And then seeing them at night, I'm like, what is that?
right,
What is that? And then you sleep in Amarillo, or I slept in Amarillo, I sleep in Amarillo, get up the next morning, and I see them, and I'm like, oh, these weren't here like 10
Yeah.
years ago when I was making this drive all the time.
right.
Yeah.
So speaking of Amarillo, Amarillo's kind of like, it's one of those towns that I love in Texas, but it smells. That is where all of America's beef is processed, basically, because there are cattle farms out there, and I love the town, I love the song, but God, when you drive through there, it is like a blanket. Like, so when you're driving on an interstate and you go past a skunk,
Yeah.
you gotta hold your breath, and
Right.
it gets in your car and it lingers.
Yeah.
Listen, It's not as bad as a skunk, but it hits you just as hard, and it lingers until you're well past Amarillo.
Oh, yeah.
So
You can like taste it, smell it.
about 15 miles out of Amarillo, you want your AC on recirculate, and you're still gonna get it.
Yeah.
So that's just my little take on Amarillo.
Yeah.
So I remember, so I pulled into the rental at, I don't know, 7 or 8 in the morning.
24 hours later, literally.
You had already been there, and you
2
got
hours.
you had like a little power nap, and when I pulled in, we just got to work. We
Yeah.
unpacked that entire moving truck after a 24-hour drive from Vegas with no rest. But, you know, retired law enforcement, ex-military, you know, there's gonna be some hardware
Suck it up, buttercup.
in that Penske truck that I wasn't comfortable leaving out on the curb, because if somebody steals that truck,
All that.
that would be a bad situation. So we wanted that stuff unloaded and secured. So we did that.
And then the kids pulled up. So
Yeah,
my son and his girlfriend came with us to help, and they had to drive through the crazy weather. I don't think they cared for that either.
right. They actually stopped in New Mexico
Yeah,
to spend the night.
Yeah, I think they say but I don't know.
I think they were in Albuquerque, yeah.
And then they followed us in there. Like they come up and our truck is unloaded. They're like, "You're done."
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I'll tell you what. I was ready to sleep for 2 days after that.
Yeah.
And then shortly after we got into this rental property was in Sanger, Texas, which is just north of Dallas, and we had Snowmageddon hit. So that cold weather front that hit Arizona and New Mexico basically followed us to Texas, and I got to tell you, Texans do not know how to drive in winter conditions.
In any bad conditions.
No.
No rain, no snow, no ice.
Literally, it seemed like every highway sign between Sanger and Dallas was wrecked because somebody drove off the road and smashed a sign. Like, it was absurd.
But and there was no propane, no gas, and then our electricity on for a couple hours,
Right.
off for 4 or 5, just on and off, on and off.
Yeah, intermittent power,
Horrible.
and it was literally what? It was it was freezing conditions. It was under 32.
It only snowed like what, 5, maybe. I'm being generous by saying 8. I don't even think it was that. Maybe 5 inches. Really.
Well, all I know is I walked into the backyard and the snow didn't even come as deep as the top of my shoe.
Oh,
Like, literally the snow
it was
was
nothing.
like an inch,
Yeah.
or it was under 2 inches
Yeah.
for sure, because literally there was patches of grass in the backyard.
Yeah.
It wasn't even covered in snow. So,
People just like, I gotta go to work. I'm like, it's snowing. We don't
Right.
have any equipment
Right.
in the North Texas area because we're not used to the snow. Amarillo, they would have handled it like a champ. Other places in Texas, you know,
Right.
along that.
Dallas was not prepared. They did not have anything to clear the road. I don't know if the pumps were frozen or if gas rigs just couldn't get into gas stations to fill them. But pretty much every gas station in and around Dallas was shut down.
Yeah.
It was rare for several days to be able to get gas.
Okay, but tell them what you did with your camper.
Okay, so we're talking several days with intermittent power. You know, you have power for maybe 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it's out for 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
So I decided, well, shit, you know, I just spent several winters in Idaho,
Right.
sub-zero temperatures, hunting and trapping. So I'm going to bust out the Camp Chef. And so I bust out the Camp Chef, which runs on propane. And I'm in the kitchen. And I'm cooking
Inside.
inside the house. And, you know, I don't really see a problem with it. I'm fine. And you know, I've got my headlamp from camping and hunting on my head because there's no power. And you come into the kitchen and immediately you must have smelled the propane.
Yeah.
Because you're like, open the door, you're going to kill us. So I just, at that point, I felt like I was camping out inside the house and I wanted sausage and eggs. So I made it. We didn't die.
And I.
We made it through Snowmageddon. The administration of Texas, the governor, everybody, they took a lot of heat because of the power being out. Um, I think they've put stuff in place now to prevent it, but time will tell.
Yeah.
So basically, bringing you back up to speed, we've moved from Las Vegas. We're in a rental in Sanger, Texas. That's less than half of the house that we left.
Oh, yeah.
And
Snowmageddon.
we're basically, we could go into more detail at another time, more about Vegas and Metro. If you guys want to hear that, when you watch this, just add comments below. Trust me, there's a lot to talk about Vegas and there's a lot to talk about Metro. So this is just briefly an introduction and it's not really detailed, but we could always entertain those moving forward. When we come back on our next show, we're going to be discussing the process of buying a home in Texas, searching for land, and what we intend to do with that property.
We want to thank you for joining us on our journey. And please leave us any comments or questions you might have. And go ahead, give us a like, share, and subscribe to Huntsman Ranch. You'll have a good day now.